Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to impartially unpack some truly paradigm-shifting concepts presented in Chapter 5 of the Mystical Laws, specifically focusing on the profound question of what it genuinely means to believe. We'll be exploring how the source text frames shedding our worldly ego and harnessing the sheer power of belief as the ultimate mechanisms required to literally transcend dimensions. If you've ever felt that tension, between achieving worldly success and seeking deeper spiritual meaning, well, the philosophy outlined in this chapter tackles that exact paradox head-on.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the paths of guiding spirits, then we'll look at reversing worldly values, explore Muga or the selfless path, and finally, we'll unpack the power to believe. Let's get right into it.
Starting off with Section 1, Paths of Guiding Spirits. To truly grasp this philosophy, the text asks us to look closely at highly advanced souls, or what it calls guiding spirits of light. When these spirits actually manifest in our physical, three-dimensional world, their lives usually take one of three distinct paths. The first is, often tragic. They're so spiritually advanced, so far ahead of their time, that they go completely unrecognized until long after their death. The second path is a spirit who finds some success but faces intense worldly frustration, so they shift their focus entirely to leaving spiritual teachings behind. And the third, that's the rare soul who possesses both immense spiritual insight and the practical capabilities to achieve massive recognition in their own era.
Now, the text uses this incredibly poignant metaphor to describe that second path. It paints a really vivid picture of a spirit enduring intense worldly frustration, yet agonizingly spinning out spiritual teachings for future generations. Kind of like a silkworm spinning its thread. It's a powerful visual, right? Enduring physical hardship for the sake of a higher, lasting legacy.
So this sets up a massive contrast. What our three-dimensional world labels as a flat-out failure, or frustration, or even a tragic life, is actually framed by this philosophy as a profound spiritual mission successfully completed. It completely flips the script and challenges us to reconsider how we actually measure a successful life.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, Reversing Worldly Values.
This structural contradiction brings up a totally fascinating question. Think about it. If these guiding spirits possess such incredibly high cognitive and spiritual power, why do their lives so often lack what we would call worldly success? It's designed to challenge our baseline assumptions about what it actually means to thrive.
The answer, according to the text, lies in an intentional paradigm shift. The philosophy argues that true spiritual development requires the exact opposite of what our physical society demands. The world tells us to build our ego, accumulate wealth, embrace survival of the fittest. But the spiritual values presented here, they demand selflessness, letting go, and actively shedding that very ego. To succeed in one realm almost guarantees a perceived failure in the other.
Moving right along to Section 3, Muga, the selfless path.
This dramatic reversal of values centers around a core Buddhist concept heavily highlighted in the chapter, Muga. Muga is essentially the absolute antidote to the worldly ego. Interestingly, the text makes a really fascinating psychological observation here. It points out that this ego naturally begins forming around the age of 10 as a necessary survival mechanism. It protects us in a competitive physical world. But while it keeps us physically safe, that same ego eventually hardens into a spiritual cage that limits our true potential.
And this brilliantly illustrates the central paradox of the chapter. To the worldly eye, practicing selflessness looks like you're losing. You might appear weak or like an easy target. But spiritually speaking, shedding this lower self, or throwing away the self, is presented as the absolute prerequisite. It's the only actual way to gain the higher self and achieve true self-realization.
In fact, the text posits an incredible spiritual return on investment. It suggests that the person who throws away the most worldly attachment actually gains the most. By operating from a place of complete selflessness, the source claims you can multiply your given life force and spiritual impact 10, 100, or even 1,000 times over. It's this massive multiplier effect born entirely from just letting go.
And finally, we arrive at Section 4, the power to believe.
Everything we've discussed so far acts as preparation for the ultimate goal outlined by the author, which is breaking through what are called dimensional walls. The entire philosophy builds toward this singular, monumental capability of merging the physical world with the spiritual one.
The text argues that an ordinary, ego-driven person simply cannot break this barrier. It requires the sheer, profound power to believe.
Notice the specific word choice used here. Belief acts as the weapon to cross the wall between this world and the next. So belief here isn't just a passive feeling, it's an active, powerful, tearing force. To summarize this structural journey we've been on, transcending these dimensions requires a rigorous, step-by-step evolution. First, one must utilize the power to endure. That means enduring physical hardships and worldly misunderstandings without holding on to resentment. Second, one must systematically empty oneself of the worldly ego through the practice of muga. And finally, having cleared away that lower self, one can fully activate and wield the power of belief to merge with the higher dimensions.
So, we'll leave you with this rather provocative thought to consider regarding your own worldview. If belief is the tool required to break the dimensional wall, what worldly attachments might be keeping your own walls intact? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the philosophy of the mystical laws. We'll catch you in the next explainer.